Hello, my wonderfully drowsy time travelers, my fellow lovers of slow-moving history and stories that melt your mind into dreams. Before we begin our journey to the distant past, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If these sleepy stories help you drift off, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us create more content to lull restless minds to sleep. And if you're feeling extra cozy, leave us a comment. Tell us how long you lasted before dozing off. We love reading your experiences. Now, find your most comfortable position. Let your eyelids grow heavy, and allow my voice to guide you into relaxation. A hush once lay over the wintry Champ de Mars, where thin silver fog drifted from the sleeping Seine and muffled even the clatter of distant hooves. 2 years before crowds would cheer at the 1889 Exposition, the open lawn waited in patient darkness, holding its breath for something bold, yet still unborn. Above the mist, cathedral domes glowed faintly, like lanterns set upon a shelf, hinting that metal, too, might soon learn the grace of height. Let your shoulders ease down, loosening like sails when evening winds fall calm. A slow inhale, a quieter exhale. There is no hurry here, only the measured heartbeat of 19th century craftsmen who took each rivet like a note in a lullaby. Just beyond the lamplit avenues, civil servants had declared an unusual wish. A tower of 300 meters raised in time for France to welcome the world. Tonight, we wander through the first 12 unhurried months, contracts inked on chilly mornings. Earth turned under frost, iron birthed from distant forges, each step small, specific and true. By tracing those early pulses, we discover how a skeleton of wrought iron gathered breath in the space of mere seasons. May 1886 brought the official call inside drafty ministry halls. 89 proposals unfurled across oak tables. Most stalled below 200 meters. None hinted at radical lightness. The design signed by Gustave Eiffel, engineers Émile Noguier and Maurice Cohen, and architect Stephen Sofster showed 4 open lattice legs curving inwards like roots meeting a trunk. Ministers voted on 12 May. Prize money was modest, but the real bounty, a 20-year concession to operate lifts and restaurants, caught Eiffel's eye. Snow still flecked rooflines when the contract was ratified on 8 January 1887. It bound the company to finish by 31 December 1888. After 20 years, the state reserved the right to dismantle the entire work. Few suspected radio aerials or meteorological labs would someday save it. Financing followed strict arithmetic. The projected cost, 6.5 million francs, would not flow entirely from government coffers. Eiffel agreed to shoulder 80% himself, recouping through entrance fees and dining leases. To bridge remaining gaps, he floated shares at 500 francs apiece. Subscriber lists filled with small investors, widows in the Marais. A bookseller from Lyon even a silk merchants' guild that purchased 20 units as a patriotic gesture. Beneath these ledgers lay human arithmetic. A sliding wage scale promised basic riveters 5.5 francs per 10-hour day, while experienced foremen earned almost double. Accidents in the air could be final. Hence an indemnity fund set aside 60,000 francs, enough to grant each grieving family 2 years of rent. Such quiet provisions whispered a truth. Ambition must respect gravity's whims. At dawn, on 28 January 1887, 30 surveyors paced the dew-laden turf, aligning brass pegs to a 125-meter square. The grass nodded under their boots, still brittle with frost, while a single brass plumb bob steadied in cold. Over 9 grey days, 2 horse-drawn scrapers rasped away flower beds and promenades, lifting 12,000 cubic meters of soil into rattling wagons bound for backfill beyond the city wall. The sign sits barely 5 meters below the Champ de Mars terrace, and river silt hides pockets of watery clay to anchor 2 western feet of the tower firmly. Engineers sank pneumatic caissons to a gravel stratum 15 meters deep. 40 sand hogsmen with oil-greased mustaches and cotton in their ears labored under air pressure 4 times that upon the boulevards above. Every 4 hours, a whistle echoed, signaling exchange through narrow locks so bodies could acclimate without the painful bends. Within each buried chamber, masons ladled liquid concrete in 30-centimeter lifts. Charcoal braziers stood beside the formwork, raising temperature just enough to coax hydration despite freezing winds aloft. When final lifts hardened, each caisson rose like a cork under pressure. Ballast water was drained with hiss and gurgle, leaving a monolith ready to cradle iron. Concrete alone could not receive the tower's forest of trusses. 8 cast iron soleillantes. Anchor shoes were required. Foundries at Fort Chambord poured 6% nickel steel into sand molds the size of carriages. After cooling, machinists bored 16 vertical holes accurate to a single 1/10 millimeter. Into each hole went a bolt nearly 8 centimeters thick, its threads chased with beeswax for smooth rotation. While foundations cured in the field, the skeleton's veins emerged inside Eiffel's Levallois-Perret works north of the city. 18,038 individual pieces, plates, angles, lattice bars passed beneath traveling cranes. Punch presses stamped rivet holes by the thousand. A foreman logged tolerances with a steel feeler gauge no wider than a thumbnail. When night whistles blew, one could walk between meat stacks and smell faint coal, oil settling like incense upon iron. Logistics required a rhythm of rails. A temporary spur left the Saint Lazare line, curving over culverts to reach the exposition grounds. 2 saddle tank locomotives named Lucy and Julie puffed gently, hauling flat cars loaded with 300 tons of prefabricated iron each week. Children playing marbles near Grenelle. Bridge paused to watch crimson-painted girders glint behind steam clouds. By July, the site bristled with 4 timber falsework towers, each 30 meters high, clad in diagonally braced pine still fragrant with resin. Winches creaked as workers raised the first slanting legs. Alignment proved delicate. Hydraulic jacks seated atop oak blocks adjusted inclination by single millimeters. Guided by theodolites whose brass lenses caught afternoon sun like sleepy dragonflies. Daily life, aloft, obeyed its own micro-clock. The dawn horn sounded at 5. Men queued for a 12-minute hoist ride woven from hemp rope to the growing deck 45 meters above ground. A riveting gang always numbered 4. Holder upman, catcher, beater, and furnace tender. They moved in a square dance of sparks, setting 25,000 rivets each week. At dusk, a second horn drifted over the city, and lanterns along temporary catwalks winked out one by one. December carried brittle winds, turning iron tools painfully cold. Eiffel ordered brass braziers every 8 meters along service platforms. Within their bowls, coke roared bright, keeping rivet shanks near 900 degrees Celsius. Workers rotated gloves beside the glow, then hurried to drive molten pins home before heat escaped. Occasionally, a rivet missed its hole, fell, and skittered across planks, like a comet's ember fading to black. Flood water from the Seine complicated supply. On 14 January 1888, barges bore primer paint could not reach the quay. Knights of the river lashed them to upstream moorings. Yet progress scarcely paused. Foremen shifted crews to brace installation tasks, their hammers ringing a muffled winter cadence against the wind. Late winter finally surrendered. On 26 March 1888, the first platform closed its steel rectangle at exactly 57 meters above the lawn. Newspapers crowed next morning that Paris possessed a balcony balanced upon air. For 2 afternoons, the company opened narrow scaffolds to selected journalists who climbed trembling ladders. They reported unexpected absence of sway, though one columnist admitted his knees shook more than the iron. Amid celebration, safety logs recorded one solemn entry. Carpenter Antoine Ristori slipped on ice while measuring bolt setbacks the day after Christmas 1887, falling 23 meters to timber decking below. He was the sole fatality of that entire year, grim testament, yet also evidence of Eiffel's insistence on guardrails and safety lines wherever possible. With the platform secured, attention turned toward the sky. Yet night settled over the Champ de Mars with deep calm. Furnaces cooled to embers. Scent of red lead, primer, mingled with early blossoms in imperial gardens nearby. The tower now stood exactly 1/4 its final height, but already its outline drew strange new constellations against apartment windows. One could lean upon the balustrade, hear water lapping far below, and imagine telegraph clicks that would someday race along its iron nerves into the century beyond. Soft street lamps quivered on the river, and if you breathe gently, you may picture their reflections trembling in cadence with your own pulse. The men have folded their leather aprons and set hammerheads to rest. Ledgers sleep inside wooden desks. Farriers brush horses in quiet stables. Charcoal braziers sigh out the last thin ribbons of smoke. Should your eyelids feel heavy, you may allow them to drift as the tower itself drifted upward grain by grain, bolt by bolt, thought by patient thought. Sleep folds over the city like canvas drawn to cure fresh concrete. And under that cover, everything strengthens softly. If this calm telling guides your evening steady, consider joining our gentle circle again. Sleepy Chronicles posts new wanderings through half-forgotten histories. All in the same unhurried hush. In the distance, a lone quartz clock strikes midnight, then quiet returns utterly, and the river glides on beneath its newborn lattice of dreams. May your own night flow just as smooth, carrying you past memory into rest. Dawn of late April 1888 revealed the first platform standing firm, while 4 lattice legs angled upward like unfinished violin bows. Beyond that modest shelf, a second, steeper climb awaited, demanding tools and tactics untested on any Paris skyline. Transition began with machinery itself climbing. In early May, 2 steam cranes, each 12 tons of cast iron and boilerplate, were jacked, stage by stage, onto fresh tracks bolted along the rising legs. They moved like patient beetles, hauling new girders, even as their own boilers exhaled white plumes into bright spring air. A stoker fed Welsh coal at dawn. By full pressure, the crane could swivel a 4-ton beam in a slow 90-degree arc, aligning holes with the quiet confidence of a lock finding its key. Up between platforms, engineers inserted curved arcs de liaison to brace the legs against crosswinds. These sweeping ribs, 5 meters deep at mid-span, arrived in 33 sections from Levallois-Perret d'Or on 18 June. Workers pinned the first pair 82 meters above the ground, and Parisians gathered on the Quai Branly to watch rivets sparkle in sunlight. Newspapers noted an unexpected orchestration. Each hammer strike echoed off neighboring masonry, returning as a ringing chord that drifted downriver. Daily rhythm evolved with altitude. A new hoist cage opened lattices, braced by hemp netting, cut ascent time to 6 minutes. Yet men still felt air thin, slightly beyond 90 meters. Foreman Ruiz issued wool neck warmers, dipped in camphor oil, believing the scent steadied uneasy stomachs. He was partly right. Mild vasodilation calmed most nerves, and rivet counts rose 3% the following week. Summer heat brought its own arithmetic. Wrought iron expands roughly 1 millimeter per 13 meters for every 10-degree rise. Surveyor Louise de Bracy, one of the few women on site, set brass invar gauges at dawn and at sunset, logging leg elongation to fractions of a millimeter. On 27 July, she measured a 5-degree swing that lengthened each diagonal by nearly 4 millimeters, just enough to shift bolt holes out of true. Teams waited until night falls cool, then cinch joints tight before sleep. Allow your own jaw to slacken, as if you too adjust by invisible increments. No effort at all. Mid-August thunderstorms struck with operatic drama. Lightning never touched bare iron. Temporary conductors braided copper tails dangled from crane masts. to ground rods sunk into damp soil. During the heaviest squall of 19 August, gusts reached 30 meters per second, bending the highest leg tip laterally by 40 centimeters. Observers at street level feared permanent warp, yet by morning, the steel returned to line. Bones flexing back like a reed after wind. Work rarely stopped for weather. When rain hammered rivet furnaces, blacksmiths raised canvas awnings and stoked fires with pine resin to accelerate flare. Rivet shanks glowed orange, spitting tiny blue sparks upon wet planks, while catchers wore leather aprons doubled at the shoulder to deflect steam bursts. In that steam, hammers 100 in scattered crews beat a lullaby of dull thuds, oddly soothing above muffled drizzle. The second platform floor beams arrived by train on 2 October 1888. 20-meter eye sections weighing nearly 20 tons apiece. Each bore stamped numerals referencing a ledger line, an early barcode of sorts. 2 nights later, at 1:40 a.m., Crane Julie eased the first beam into its sockets 115 meters high. Lanterns swung in velvet darkness. From afar, citizens mistook the scene for a string of low stars hovering above the city lamps. Inside a canvas shed on the ground, machinists assembled prototype rack and pinion gearboxes for future passenger lifts. Otis engineers from Yonkers inspected tooth profiles with blue steel feelers, pronouncing them within 8 microns of specification. Though the lifts would not run for months, their ghostly promise coaxed some men to dream of effortless ascent, a novelty almost beyond imagination. 4 men instituted a new brake schedule. Rather than descending entirely, crews took 20-minute pauses on catwalk hammocks slung between cross braces. At noon, a brass bugle sounded a single mellow note, and tins of lentil stew were hauled upward in nets. One riveter recalled the gentle perfume of thyme drifting far above chimney tops, making the iron taste temporarily of Provence. Wages rose with elevation. On 14 November, Eiffel approved a risk bonus of 50 centimes per shift for every 10 meters above 90. Payroll clerks carried parchment rolls in tin cylinders, climbing stair spirals to gather signatures. In graphite, these cylinders sometimes chimed against railings, a delicate wind chime echoing across empty winter sky. Even that note joined the tower's growing music. When December frost returned, engineers faced a peculiar echo problem. As legs converged toward the second platform, their sweeping void captured whistle calls and amplified them downward, startling horses on the Avenue de la Bourdonnais. Worksite physician Dr. Chavot suggested hand signals at dawn and dusk. Within days, a silent semaphore of arm motions governed rivet supply, reducing acoustic bursts by half. Snow fell 21 December 1888. Crews swept decks hourly, yet ice still glazed steel flanges. A chemist from Rouen arrived carrying barrels of glycerin brine mix, sprayed lightly. The solution lowered freezing point by 8 degrees and left rivet holes clear of fragile crystals. The same chemist later patented this blend for rail switches, crediting Eiffel's site logbooks in his filing. Let this small ingenuity mingle with your own thoughts. how simple solutions often cradle vast ambitions. By mid-January 1889, the second platform ring closed at 115 meters. A thin, excited hum spread through Paris cafes, where artists sketched rising silhouettes on napkins. Yet above the cafe chatter, quiet persisted within the lattice itself. Engineers measured sway in bitter winds at merely 7 centimeters off vertical half. The forecast, thanks to those curved braces, said the steam cranes now prepared to climb again, requiring an upright ballet. Each machine hoisted its own rail section upward, set it, then inched forward to grip new spurs. Over 48 patient hours, they traversed from platform steps onto narrowing legs, bound for 175 meters, where final stages would demand even finer balance. Night crews installed acetylene lamps every 10 meters, a first on a European site. Their pale white glow cut through mist more sharply than oil. Residents across the river compared the tower to a slender lighthouse turning slowly inland. Photographers seized long exposures, and in their plates the iron appeared as ghostly ribbon fires against a charcoal sky. February gales carried bitter dust from chalk pits northwest of Paris. Particles lodged in joint seams, risking abrasion under movement. Crews swept with oiled horsehair brushes and applied a wash of linseed oil turpentine, sealing pores until spring paint could arrive. This interim coat left a faint golden sheen, visible at sunset like a hint of dawn captured early. Eiffel himself, famously composed, climbed to the new platform on 7 March 1889. He timed the ascent, 6 minutes by hoist, 10 on foot for final ladder flights. Pulling a leather notebook from his coat, he jotted wind speed, humidity, and worker count, then quietly requested a seismograph be mounted next week. A precaution, he explained, for studying sympathetic vibrations once crowds filled the promenade. The order would make the tower an observatory as well as a monument. Near equinox, birds migrated low across the city. Swallows flocked around crane booms, riding warm drafts from boiler stacks. Riveters paused to watch the flick of small wings beside red-hot metal, a momentary braid of nature and invention. Ornithologist Paul Marshall published a brief note in La Nature, suggesting the tower might serve as a vertical reminder of river cliffs, guiding avian routes. Perhaps your own thoughts glide now, slow as those drifting swallows. On 25 March, painters tested a new Venetian red primer, formulated with minium and zinc oxide, selected to resist acid soot from factory chimneys. Sample panels hung below the second platform, and chemists marked dates in chalk. They would rinse panels weekly to measure fading. Later, this research informed color standards for bridges along the Loire. A single mishap marred the otherwise methodical climb. Apprentice fitter René Lemercier dropped an 8-kilogram spanner, which struck a timber spar and bounced harmlessly into sand below. Yet the crew above did not know. they adopted a new call on Lash before releasing any tool, a protocol that soon spread to shipyards at Le Havre after Eiffel's safety officers shared notes with port inspectors. By end of April 1889, ironworks stood at 300 meters, not yet crowned, but already surpassing anything man made on Earth. The air around the summit thinned enough that pipe-smoking foremen reported embers dying quicker. A small barometer fixed to the crane cab read 710 millimeters mercury on a mild day. Breathe as though at that height just a shade lighter, yet entirely safe where you rest. Twilight settled, turning the half-painted lattice a muted rose. Rivet furnaces glowed softer now, echoing the sky. Men coiled ropes, cooled boilers, and descended by lamplight as the city's cafes began spilling piano music into narrow streets. Somewhere below, tourists bought souvenir etchings showing a tower not yet complete, proof that imagination often prints reality before reality hardens to fact. If this unhurried ascent has eased your evening, feel welcome to drift with us again. Sleepy Chronicles keeps gentle watch over distant Eris, always without haste. The lamps of Paris dim one by one, leaving only a faint percussion of river waves against stone embankment. May those quiet pulses guide you toward deep, restoring sleep. Early spring of 1889 found a final iron length eased into place, its rivets cooling under pale moonlight. From that instant, attention turned from height to habitability, how flesh and blood visitors might glide, dine and linger within the lattice. The summit ceremony came first. At noon, on 31 March 1889, gusts fluttered a tricolour flag as Gustave Eiffel, flanked by Minister Pierre Tirard and journalist Charles Floquet, mounted the last ladder flight's 1710 steps in total, for lifts were not. Pocket barometer in Eiffel's hand read 898 hectopascals. Wind, speed touched 15 knots, rocking a brass anemometer into brisk clicks. 3 gun salutes echoed from Les Invalides, announcing the highest platform on Earth now belonged to Paris. Designers had never hidden their wager. Without smooth vertical transit, few would brave such stairs. 2 independent elevator systems were therefore contracted. Otis Brothers of Yonkers supplied twin hydraulic cages for the east and west legs. Rue Combelusier, Le Pape, a seasoned French firm, equipped the north and south. Each system relied on water pressure rather than steam alone. Within the masonry arches, at 78 meters, steel reservoirs, 80 cubic meter tanks, lined with lead-stored Zyna water, pumped by dual Worthington engines at 450 kilopascals. When valves opened, downward moving pistons pushed companion cars upward via continuous chains. An elegant sea saw that conserved energy with every cycle. Preparatory tests began 6 April. Empty cars climbed at 1.5 meters per second, stopping within 30 centimeters of target floors. Remarkable then. Engineers adjusted governor flyweights to soften jerk, and by 18 April, a full load of 100 men ascended without incident. The only mishap involved a dropped pocket watch that shattered on the second platform grille, promptly noted as non-structural loss in the log. Let your shoulders float momentarily, easing into that same measured lift, smooth as water through a pipe. While mechanics refined motion, painters prepared the skin. Laboratory trials in Roubaix had produced a Venetian red primer fortified with 10% minium. 2 intermediate coats blended iron oxide orange and lead white. A final glaze of linseed oil carried fine aluminum powder to reflect heat. 60 tons of pigment waited in oak barrels, enough to cover 200,000 square meters, including interior angles. Few eyes would ever see. 350 painters rotated in squads of 20, clipping themselves to safety rings at 3-meter intervals. Each rivet head demanded its own 4 brush strokes: north, south, east, west, lest pooled paint trap moisture. Foreman Clement noted an output of 17 rivets per minute in mild weather, halved when mistral winds arrived from afar. Parisians watched the lattice blush deeper each week, like embers brightening in a hidden hearth. Illumination soon joined color. Gas engineer Jean-Baptiste Hinard installed 10,000 mantle lamps along principal struts, each tip curled into a fleur de lis d'eau. At dusk on 30 April, these lights ignited sequentially, rippling upward in 90 seconds. Witnesses on Montmartre described a sugar-spun comet ascending the sky. 2 days later, an 8,000 candle power searchlight copper parabola 1 meter wide pivoted atop the pinnacle, brushing clouds with white arcs that steamship captains reported visible 40 kilometers downstream. Inside the first platform, carpenters assembled 4 restaurants: French, Flemish, Russian, and North African couscous, stands whose brass samovars hissed gently in trial runs. A rudimentary post office staffed by 2 clerks stamped souvenir cards with a circular cachet reading Tour de 300 metres d'eau. Nearby, meteorologist Léon Tisserand calibrated a mercury barograph. He aimed to capture diurnal pressure shifts, unobstructed by roofs, a modest but novel field laboratory. Ticketing protocols required numerical clarity. Pricing settled at 2 francs for the first platform, 3 for the second, 5 to reach the summit, roughly a laborer's daily wage. To regulate flow, Eiffel adopted a timed entry coupon system. Perforated cards, color-coded by quarter hour. Capacitance tables predicted 5,000 visitors per day could be served without queues exceeding 18 minutes, assuming both Otis and Racial lifts ran at 90% uptime. During rehearsal on 10 May, the model held queues never breached 10. Opening day to the public fell on 15 May 1889. 9 days after the wider exposition Universelle opened its gates. A light drizzle glossed cedar boardwalks, yet 30,642 people rode the lifts, each receiving a small gilt-edged booklet detailing tower statistics in 3 languages. Police ledgers recorded 5 fainting spells, altitude, unease, 2 lost umbrellas, and 1 spontaneous waltz near the brass band. No other incidents. Allow your breathing to match that gentle crowd rhythm in, out steady as elevator cables under balanced load. With success came stewardship. Eiffel's maintenance charter specified monthly rivet inspections above 200 meters and quarterly paint film thickness checks at sun-facing quadrants. 16 measurement points received stamped brass discs, each engraved with an index number to track corrosion rates. In June, crews applied a transparent lanolin-based grease to platform stair rails, learning from seacoast lighthouse keepers who swore by its salt resistance. Scientific curiosity nested quickly. On 8 August 1889, physicist Pierre Pilon suspended a 67-meter Foucault pendulum from the second platform's central opening. Observers watched its plane drift 11 degrees per hour, confirming Earth's rotation more vividly than lecture halls ever could. 3 months later, radio pioneer Edouard Ducretet mounted a coherer receiver at 300 meters, catching Morse pips from the Pantheon, 2 kilometers distant the tower's first whisper of wireless future. Summer crowds surged beyond projections, yet the elevators coped. Their hydraulic fluid warmed, threatening viscosity loss. Cooling coils of copper were wrapped around water return lines, fed by chilled Seine water. This simple retrofit cut fluid temperature by 8 degrees, restoring the stopping precision. The alteration cost 2,400 francs, recouped in 3 July days of ticket sales. At sunset on 14 July 1889, Bastille festivities crowned the lattice with a pyrotechnic halo. Magnesium flares ringed the first platform, while red Bengal fires traced arches. A soft metallic shimmer spilled onto the Seine, melding river and sky. Parisian poet Paul Verlaine wrote of a steel harp strummed by lightning, though most citizens simply stared, hushed. Revenue data from the first 4 months astonished financiers. 1.9 million francs gross, after operating costs of just under 300,000, including paint, power, and wages. Dividends of 32 francs per share were declared in December double. The conservative prospectus. Eiffel's gamble on self-funding lifted into profitable certitude long before the demolition clause could threaten. Routine weeks settled thereafter. Each dawn, 6 street sweepers hosed the esplanade. At noon, chefs ladled onion soup beneath striped awnings. Dusk found scientists checking the anemograph spool. It smoked paper. Above them, beacon lamps rotated at 2 revolutions per minute, signaling safe distance to dirigibles drifting in experimental flights from Meudon. You might imagine that distant beacon now, its beam rotating softly behind closed eyelids, encouraging thoughts to revolve at unhurried pace. By November, seasonal fog cloaked lower girders. Work crews applied rope ladders dipped in potassium permanganate solution to scrub soot. The purple wash turned rivet heads briefly lilac before rinsing clear under gentle rain. Children, watching from Trocadero steps, swore the tower changed color like autumn leaves, an illusion only repeated. Cleaners witnessed. Eiffel, ever pragmatic, requested a small apartment near the summit for scientific observation. He said, though newspapers hinted at private soirees, furnished with walnut paneling, it measured 18 square meters and featured a tiny harmonium. On 14 December, he hosted Thomas Edison, who presented a signature engraved phonograph die. The two men recorded a brief greeting. Phonograph cylinders reveal Eiffel's voice calm, mid-bass, marveling at humankind's twin triumphs of steel and sound. Maintenance planning extended to future decades. A rotating repaint schedule every 7 years was codified. Colors would grade lighter toward the top, what later brochures called ombre, iron, to counteract atmospheric haze. Even then, the tower's custodians thought in gradients, not absolutes. Feel free to settle deeper now, as those gradients soften into dusk. Winter solstice arrived, and with it, the exposition's final crowd. Attendance topped 2 million tower visitors in just over half a year. Critics who once labeled the project a smokestack without smoke fell quiet, replaced by engravers selling copperplate souvenirs near Pontiena. Steam from chestnut vendors curled toward girders, mingling aromas of sugar and iron in the cool night air. To close the inaugural season, electricians replaced gas mantles with 1,200 Edison carbon lamps along the first platform balustrade. They powered these through a Siemens dynamo housed in a brick shed by the river. The whir of armatures blended with sine waves. An electromechanical lullaby carried faintly across the water. Those lamps still glowed when New Year's bells struck 1890. Visitors toasted with mulled wine at 276 meters, while a string quartet played St. Science near the lift exits. In guest ledgers, one nurse from Rouen wrote simply, "The tower stands calm. And so, now does my heart." If this tranquil voyage through elevators and opening nights has smoothed the creases of your own, you may linger with us again. Sleepy chronicles will return softly, each time unfold. Below, the city's heartbeat eases to a slow nocturne, and the tower, once mere sketches, watches over rooftops like a steady sentinel. May its patient glow guide you untroubled into sleep. By the spring, after its dazzling debut, the tower no longer measured success in meters, but in murmured signals, delicate vibrations of science, seeking a path through open sky. In this new phase, engineers treated each girder as an antenna, every platform a laboratory ledge, waiting for discovery. April 1890 began with gusts rattling fresh copper wires stretched between the third-tier railings. Physicist Edouard Ducretet, returning with heavier coils, installed a coherer receiver tuned to 150 kHz. On the 25th, he emitted Morse pulses from the Panthéon. A glass tube detector atop the tower crackled, confirming the first French wireless exchange across open city space, 2 kilometers of air carrying dots and dashes unbroken. Generator hum soon joined wind sob. Siemens dynamos in a stone shed now fed not only lamps, but a 20 kilowatt spark transmitter. Operators wrapped linen around walnut handles to deaden vibration, feeling faint warmth bleed into night air as messages leapt invisibly toward Moudon's military base 7 kilometers west. Let your own chest rise gently, imagining electrical whispers threading between iron ribs. Meteorologists quickly claimed room in June 1891. Léon Tisserand raised a 55-meter weather mast above the summit, suspending thermographs in ventilated copper screens. Data showed temperature at 300 meters dipped on clear nights by nearly 6 degrees C relative to street level, a vertical gradient vital for storm prediction charts published in Annales du Bureau Central. Scientists craved stillness to reduce vibration during barograph traces. Carpenters embedded lead shot inside platform, flooring beneath instruments, adding 2 tons of mass at specific nodes. This damping muted oscillations to under 0.2 millimeter, even when spring gusts made flags snap audibly. The method later influenced basement designs for Pasteur Institute microscopes. August 1892 brought a visiting aeronaut, Henri Lachambre, who unreeled silk kites from the second platform to 600 meters. Each kite carried aluminum cups for sampling high-altitude dust. Spectrographic plates afterward revealed traces of sub-Saharan sand evidence. Winds could ferry continents into Paris sunsets. Newspaper sketches showed thin, white triangles fluttering above cafes, stirring equal parts wonder and cafe chatter. Maintenance crews kept pace. Repainting began October 1893, the first of the 7-year cycles Eiffel mandated. Our pigments shifted subtly. Lower legs received russet brown munsel. Niner 3-4. Mid-levels a muted umber. Summit a pale terracotta. Early illusion. Painters counted 1,093,980 rivet heads by hand, marking each with a chalk tick before brushing, an arithmetic of patience unrivaled on the Seine. The hydraulic lifts, busy every dawn, underwent winter surgery in 1894. Engineers swapped leather cup seals for vulcanized rubber gaskets supplied by Charles Goodyear's Paris licensee, cutting water leakage by 60%. They also introduced glycerin antifreeze mix, preventing valve freeze lock witnessed the previous January when mercury plunged to 21 degrees C. Inhale slowly. The way glycerin flows without haste through narrow pipe. During the 1895 solar eclipse, astronomer Henri Deslandres mounted a 25-centimeter refractor on the third deck. Iron vibrated scant millimeters, yet threatened image sharpness. To stabilize, he suspended the telescope tube from piano wire slings and recorded chromosphere spectra unmarred for the first time, so near an urban center. His plates captured helium lines, still novel to many observers. Public draw remained fierce. Attendance in 1896 averaged 2,700 visitors daily, incentivizing a culinary upgrade. Chef Auguste Escoffier consulted on a sky cuisine menu, light consommes and chilled fruit compotes, believing rich sauces subdued at altitude. Receipts List 4,200 servings of peach melba that summer, garnished with violets crystallized in sugar, their perfume faint against iron tang deep. Economic tides turned generous. By 1897, dividends hit 42 francs per share. With surplus funds, Eiffel financed a small wind tunnel on the ground beneath the North Lake. Open March 1898, the 2.3-meter test section hosted aerodynamic trials for propeller blades. Aviation pioneer Clement Ader measured lift coefficients here before attempting his Avian 3. Electricity replaced gas mantle lamps entirely for the 1900 exposition Universelle. George Claude's team strung over 100 kilometers of insulated copper, introducing alternating current feed from a brand new steam turbine near Issy-les-Moulineaux. On 15 April 1900, 5:55 p.m., a synchronized switch on sent a shimmering cascade upward in 50 millisecond increments. Spectators likened it to phosphorescent rain climbing the night. Elevator modernization accompanied illumination. Otis fitted new water balance governors, enabling 2.25 ms travel, cutting summit journey to 8 minutes, including stops. Q studies by statistician Emile Borel, later famed for probability theory, showed visitor throughput rose to 7,800 per day. Without congestion, data charted in an early application of queuing model. Perhaps feel numbers aligning quietly. As waiting times shrink inside tidy columns, scientific milestones multiply. On 5 November 1901, Italian physicist Guglielmo Marconi visited, transmitting 110 kHz signals received by an oral detector in London's post office station, 400 kilometers away, proving continental. Diary entries mention Marconi remarking on a singing tension in the iron under wind. An auditory guide to aerial tuning. Wind tunnel research blossomed. Gustave Eiffel's expanded laboratory opened January 1903 at the tower's foot. Featured a closed-circuit design producing uniform flows up to 30 ms. Here, aviation pioneers Blériot and Farman tested wing camber variations, while engineers Vaunt Arrhenius examined drag of atmospheric probes. The LabLog 2046 test runs its first year, each lasting under 2 minutes to prevent motor overheating. March 1905 introduced a seismic recorder, a pendulous brass cylinder suspended within an oil-damped cradle on the sun. It chronicled micro-tremors from earthquakes as distant as Calabria. 1 September 1905. Earliest continuous French seismic line. Geologists celebrated data free of basement noise, yet contended with wind aliasing, which they removed with Fourier analysis hand computed at first by trio of clerks using slide rules. Routine painting returned in 1907, adopting an experimental aluminum powder finish on uppermost 100 meters to test thermal emissivity T. Test thermal emissivity. Surface temperature dropped 3 degrees under July sun, reducing thermal expansion by half a centimeter, tiny, yet reassuring to telegraph operators who reported frequency drift correlating with tower length. Political winds swirled nearby. In October 1908, suffragette Hubertine Ockler staged a banner drop from the second deck reading votes for women. Gendarmerie reached her within 9 minutes via south elevator. Newspapers argued a slower hydraulic system might have granted broader publicity. The event, nonetheless, etched the tower into social activism memory. Let banners of thought drift and settle. No urgency pressing now. Radio would soon shift from experiment to enterprise. In January 1909, engineer Gustave Ferrier persuaded military authorities to fund a 200-kilowatt rotary spark transmitter on the second platform. Twin masts, extended antenna, length to 725 meters, radiating signals captured 3,000 kilometers away in Algiers. A strategic link knitting colonies with Paris Command. That same year triggered the demolition clause. Yet, Ferrier's wireless success, plus tourism revenue, convinced Parliament on 18 May 1909 to declare the tower a permanent national observatory, voiding any dismantlement. The vote passed 392 to 3. Dissenters feared upkeep costs, but were overruled by data showing net profits exceeding 800,000 francs annually. To celebrate reprieve, October 1909 saw installation of a chiming clock 4-meter faces on the first platform, powered by a gravity escapement dropping a 300-kilogram lead weight each hour. Bells sounded low across fog-bound quarters, a steel lullaby marking survival beyond legal sunset. The hydraulic lifts faced obsolescence in 1910 floods when submerged pipelines halted service. Rapid retrofits swapped water pistons for electric traction motors within 3 months, an engineering sprint documented in 70 blueprint sheets. These traction lifts carried 65 passengers at 3.5 ms, half again faster than original spec, and consumed 1/4 the energy thanks to regenerative braking, feeding current back into new Westinghouse converters. Late summer of 1911 brought meteor shower Perseids. Astronomer Camille Flammarion hosted a viewing on third deck, handing smoked glass spectacles to 50 guests. They tallied 415 meteors between 1 and 4 a.m., correlating peak bursts with photographic plates timed by an electric chronograph wired to the Paris Observatory. Subsequent journal reports granted the tower yet another scholarly citation. Picture those brief silver streaks fading softly like fleeting worries. By 1912, Gustave Eiffel himself prepared for retirement, but unveiled one last experiment, a gravity drop test of air resistance. He released wooden spheres of varied density from the second platform, timing falls with pneumatic tubes that actuated mercury contacts each 10 meters. Results validated quadratic drag coefficients still cited in aerospace tables. A year later, Paris Aviation Week featured dirigible flights circling the tower at 250 meters. Pilots used its beacon as racetrack pylon. Crowds applauded engines throbbing faintly above cafe awnings. Insurance underwriters calculated premiums based on tower proximity risk, inadvertently birthing modern air traffic zoning. In French law, ... if your own mind circulates like those quiet airships, allow it to drift wider, yet calmer. Through these experiments and upgrades, iron remained constant guardian, flexing subtly, receiving paint, conducting words and weather alike. It was no longer mere exhibition trinket, but a scaffold for understanding wind, signal, and the trembling planet itself. If these gentle chronicles of wireless sparks and scientific ladders have eased your waking thoughts, feel welcome to visit again. Sleepy Chronicles keeps a lamp burning in quiet archives, always waiting with unhurried. Below, Paris dims its lamps, and the tower answers with a steady beacon, pulse by pulse, guiding river fog and roaming dreams toward tranquil harbors. May its patient glow escort you softly into night's deeper hush. Summer of 1914 drew long copper shadows across the Champ de Mars, and newly tensed officers began seeing the tower less as a tourist perch, more as a listening spear pointed toward distant frontier. From this moment, iron would serve patrols of airwaves, and later, the soft flicker of cathode screens, its lattice adapting to the century's quickening pulse. Mobilization orders arrived 2 August 1914. Engineers from the 8th Telegraph Battalion trucked in 2 arc transmitters and strung 600 meters of phosphor bronze antenna wire between the summit mast and a hastily erected derrick on the Trocadero Hill. Within hours, call sign LL communicated artillery movements to the 6th Army near Meaux, an emergency link credited with routing trains away from shell-damaged lines. A chill sprinkle of rain blew through those early watches. Signal sergeants rubbed frost from cast iron steps at dawn. They logged wavelengths in cramped penciled columns, 900 m for ground wave, 1600 m for sky bounce. One entry on 6 September notes, reception of German field, cipher, at 11:13 p.m. Later decrypted to reveal a planned assault toward Nantuil information that shifted brigade reserves within 12 hours. The tower itself braced for violence. In November 1914, a 75mm anti-aircraft cannon nested on the first deck, its recoil transmitted through laminated spruce pads to protect rivets. Gunners drilled daily yet fired only twice, repelling a Zeppelin spied by moonlight over St. Cloud. No shell hit its mark, but the incident birthed an early doctrine. Altitude alone could be watchdog. Thick iron or not, allow tension to ebb gently. As rivets relaxed after each thunderous salvo across winter trenches, jamming attempts grew. German spark sets me alone, flooded ether with broad band hiss. French operators answered by narrowing receiver coils, pioneering the use of regenerative feedback to sharpen selectivity, an experiment that later guided Edwin Armstrong's superhead architecture across the Atlantic. Armistice in November 1918, turned guns silent. Yet the tower's cables hummed hotter than ever. On 24 December 1918, the Service de la Radiotélégraphie sent a piano rendition of Minuit Chrétien across 41.8 M waves, Paris's first public holiday broadcast. Listeners in Lyon reported clear tones, punctuated only by soft circuit hiss like distant surf. Civil adaptation meant structural tweaks. Electric beacons replaced wartime searchlights. In 1919, red for aviation hazard atop the mast, white revolving lamps along mid-levels. Each beacon consumed 2.8 kilowatts, fed by a new 4,000-volt line buried beneath Avenue de Suffren. Paint returned in 1923 with the debut of standardized tower brown dot dye. Chemists blended 3 gradations: dark sienna at the base, medium cocoa midway, pale umber near the peak, to counter aerial haze. Over 7 months, 500 painters working on hanging stages consumed 45 tons of pigment and 1,500 brushes. The discarded bristles later recycled into scrubbing pads for railway locomotives. A sharper cultural current surged 6 November 1921, when Station Radiola aired France's first scheduled radio concert from a transmitter bolted to the second platform. Subscription tallies tripled within a week. Iron had become invisible chamber orchestra, as well as skyline glyph. Throughout the roaring 20s, visitors again queued beneath striped awnings now for broadcasting studio tours. Guides demonstrated carbon microphones, letting tourists whisper wishes that fluttered out over rolling farmland. An ethereal postcard skipping cables entirely. Technical staff modernized lifts in 1927, installing drum-wound electric motors by Société Alsacienne Alsatienne. New travel speed, 3.5 m. Energy recuperation fed station batteries that powered overnight beacon flashes, saving 21,000 francs in annual coal costs. Rain-slick girders hosted additional science. In 1930, meteorologist Lucien Lacoste mounted a prototype gravimeter on the 3rd deck, discovering microvariations of 17 milligauss, correlated with lunar perigee data, later refining tidal prediction table. Let your own awareness drift like lunar tides. Steady yet subtle, television crept in as new marvel. René Barthélemy's experimental 60-line telesign transmitter went live on 26 April 1935 from a hut on the second platform. Parisians owning airy silhouettes of ballerinas twirling before sheet metal reflectors. The broadcast traveled 8 kilometers with surprising fidelity. By 1937, resolution jumped to 455 lines, and nightly newscasts opened with a stylized tower logo, etched in oscillating white stripes. The same year brought the exposition Internationale des Arts et Techniques des Hommes. Lighting designer André Granet festooned struts with sodium vapor tubes, casting a warm amber glow. At the pinnacle, a xenon lighthouse rotated 6 times per minute, its 10-kilowatt arc visible from Chartres during clear nights. A contemporary critic dubbed it the lantern of modern Babel. Storm clouds of an altogether darker sort gathered in September 1939. Engineering Corps removed key elevator couplings, storing them in gravel-filled crates at the Louvre's basement to thwart potential invaders from exploiting the lifts. On 13 June 1940, German troops entered Paris. Within days, officers ordered a giant swastika flag hoisted. Wind shredded the first banner in hours, forcing a smaller replacement, a historical footnote of irons. Disregard for cloth tyrannies. Resistance saboteurs struck quietly 3 January 1942, severing power to broadcast antennas for 9 minutes, long enough to block propaganda transmissions to U-boats in the Bay of Biscay. Gestapo electricians traced circuits but never identified the culprits, only finding faint sulfur scent from a charged cordite fuse. Allied bombers spared the tower, partly because pilots used its beacon as orientation marker during night raids. When liberation came, 25 August 1944, Free French troops scaled half-repaired stairs, raising the tricolor above bullet-pocked railings before midday bells rang. Restoration raced forward. By May 1946, Westinghouse traction motors replaced all aging machinery, doubling summit throughput to 10,000 daily passengers. The same period saw FM transmitters hoisted first 100 kW, then 200, spreading crystal-clear accordion music to province towns previously limited to static. July 1957 crowned a lattice with an 18-meter television mast, lifting overall height to 320.75 meters. Its aluminum tubes weighed just 9 tons, but installers balanced each like bamboo, mindful of resonance near 1.75 Hz that could ripple down through platforms. By 1964, UNESCO declared the tower part of a universal cultural tableau, painted for the first time with airless sprayers. Crews laid 60 tons of new Eiffel brown, formulated free of lead. They also installed double-pane windbreak glass around summit galleries, cutting chill factor by 40%, so stargazers could linger, sense that gentler air, free of stinging gusts, settling around quiet highs. Tourism soared. 10 million visitors crossed turnstiles between 1965 and 1975 dark. To soothe congestion, architects embedded 2 spiral emergency stairs inside southeast leg, adding 1,040 extra steps, mostly unseen from ground. Structural fatigue drew scrutiny in 1980. Engineers from Société d'Appui Technique conducted ultrasonic scans, flagging 1,700 pitted members for toll. Over 5 years, they replaced iron plates with matching alloys, each switch logged on perforated magnetic tape, a digital ledger beneath 19th century curves. Reopening festivities, 31 March 1985, celebrated iron's centenary birthday. Electrician Pierre Bidot unveiled 336 sodium halide projectors, casting a golden hue from base to tip. Tourists sipping champagne on glass floors watched soft amber webs glide across cloth awnings below. The millennium beckoned countdowns. On 31 December 1999, 20,000 twinkling strobes triggered by GPS signal erupted for 5 minutes every hour, a spectacle powered by 60 kilometers of cable discreetly hugging girders. Engineers predicted bulb life of 10,000 cycles. Most lasted until lead refit in 2012. Though green consciousness took root in 2015. 2 vertical axis wind turbines, each 7 meters tall, nestled 120 meters high within cross frames, generating 10,000 quad optiques, high enough for a summit boutiques. Solar arrays fueled water heaters, rain recovery systems cleansed restroom basins, lowering consumption by 45%. COVID year 2020 dimmed foot traffic, yet maintenance persisted. Drone-mounted LiDAR mapped 3 billion point cloud nodes, identifying micro-corrosion at joints once reachable only by rope. Robotic crawlers equipped with eddy current probes then sealed flaws using precision epoxy, reducing human exposure. Nied, oh, so guilty. Badmok, June 2023. Hosted quantum key distribution tests. Entangled photons pulsed between roof-mounted emitters and Sorbonne labs 3 kilometers away. Iron acting preliminary logs cited 0.7%. Bit error rate, a step toward unbreakable encryption in the very air where biplanes once circled for sport. Breathe slow. Imagine data weaving silk threads. No wind can fray. Visitor tallies crossed 300 million in autumn 2024. More footsteps than there are seconds in 9 full years. Yet the lattice stands with measured breath, 7,300 tons balanced on 8 shoes. Repaint cycle unwavering. Science still nesting in its eaves. If these quiet passages through war signals, radio dawn, and electric shimmer have smoothed the folds of your day, know that sleepy chronicles will keep unspooling such velvet threads whenever you return. Below, the sign drifts, ink dark beneath arching lamps, while overhead the tower's beacon turns as it always has, one patient revolution at a time, guiding thoughts away from clamor toward. May its rotating glow steady your own rhythms into peaceful slumber. Spring sunlight again slips along the lattice, yet the tower's steadiest rival now is quiet corrosion rather than lofty ambition. Across scheduling boards and policy chambers, technicians map the coming decade bolt by patient bolt, determined that iron should outlive the century that once doubted it. Each new year begins with ritual hibernation. From 6 January to 7 February 2025, the summit and the 2ND to top elevator will close, allowing engineers to service guide rollers and change wind sensor housings without tourist footsteps. Beneath that short pause lies a vast campaign, the largest refurbishment in 40 years, budgeted at €380 million, and scheduled through 2031, a pledge seat made after a February strike. Money alone cannot erase old paint. Lead discovered beneath earlier coats limits abrasive stripping. Only 5% of surfaces were fully cleaned during the 2022-24 cycle. leaving unions pressing for slower, safer progress. To see what hands cannot reach, drones in 2024 scanned 3 billion LiDAR points, feeding a digital twin that now flags micro pits smaller than a pinhead and predicts fatigue years before steel size allowed. Alongside the digital avatar, fiber optic strands woven into critical gussets register strain shifts of 2 microstrains, dispatching alerts the way pulse oximeters watch silent arteries. The next repaint will debut a silane binder, Eiffel Brown 2028, lowering volatile emissions by 45%, while promising adhesion through harsher summer heat waves, forecast for mid-century. Visible change arrived even before paint dried. Olympic rings mounted on 8 July 2024 glow nightly in lead azure, provoking a tug of war between City Hall and the Culture Ministry over what sustainability threads itself quietly through girders. 2 vertical axis turbines already spin. Tens and Ababua. Each year, plans filed in 2026 add thin photovoltaic film along the first platform, balustrade. Crowds, paused in pandemic years, surged to 5.9 million in 2024 and are forecast to top 7 million next season. A new queue balancing algorithm adjusts time ticket prices hourly, trimming average waiting by 12 minutes without hurried shuffles at the gate. Traction ropes themselves evolve. A 2027 contract will splice aramid core cables 30% lighter than steel into Summit cars, extending service life 2.5 decades, while reducing motor load during steep winter gales. Heritage status too is under review. Some lawmakers propose elevating the tower from regional to national monument, while preservation groups lobby UNESCO to buffer nearby sightlines. Hearings expected in 2026 promise fresh charters and perhaps fresh funding. Quantum researchers remain night tenants. After the 2024 photon pair trial, planners aim to stitch the tower's node into the Euroxy network, sending encryption keys over Paris rooftops faster than drivers can change traffic lights. Even light itself grows gentler. The 2022 LED retrofit now dims automatically at midnight, shifting to amber wavelengths, less jarring for migrating bats that trace the Seine's moonlit corridor. Botanists nurture a quieter layer. Still a glass-walled vertical garden installed on the first floor in 2024. Hosts 4,000 plants cooling deck, temperatures by 1.2 degrees. See, farther ahead, curators announced a 2031 art competition for a light labyrinth of programmable filaments that will weave through lower arches during the Dismantlement Clause Centenary Festival, an echo of Sparks' Ducretet. If these preparations seem intricate, let them settle like gentle rain on iron, each droplet a promise of tomorrow, tended early. Should this calm chronicle feel soothing, remember you are welcome any evening. Sleepy Chronicles will continue polishing forgotten corners of history in its unhurried glow. The river glides beneath muted lamps. The beacon turns one seamless revolution, and your own thoughts may glide just as steadily into rest. April ushered in a muted dawn over Paris, and the tower, fresh from its winter hibernation, stretched quietly, sheath after sheath of orange-brown steel warming under pale sun. Where 19th century riveters once listened for hammering, present-day guardians lean into the hush of optical fibers and data streams, intent on hearing danger long before iron speaks aloud. An invisible pulse now travels every gusset, tiny strains sensing fibers bonded inside plate recesses, record micro-stretch no wider than a human hair, and relay those numbers to the tower's new digital twin, a full-scale virtual copy, spinning on servers. Machine learning routines sift that feed each night, flagging welds whose tension drifted more than 2 microstrain in a week, well below the threshold of worry, yet enough to cue preventive bolts and fresh sealant. Engineers christened the platform Sentinel, a quiet nod to its electronic watchfulness. Above, climate researchers added instruments of their own. Since 2023, Doppler LiDAR boxes peer across rooftops, mapping wind shear in the boundary layer. Their lasers time minuscule dust reflections to chart gusts within 1 meter resolution. Teams from the Institute for Meteorology calibrated these beams against tower-mounted radiosonde probes through March 2024, building a harmonized profile now feeding Europe's Copernicus forecasts. Results show nocturnal jets rolling over Paris more sharply than models predicted, a finding already nudging flight descent charts at Orly Airport. Let your diaphragm ease, expanding like those slow green laser fans, wide yet unhurried. Guardianship must also touch the visitor's journey. Accessibility architects recently completed tactile routes. Bronze studs guide canes from garden gates to elevator kiosks. Perimeter handrails whisper braille captions at elbow height, describing skyline silhouettes to sight-impaired. Every lift cab now murmurs floor numbers in 3 languages, plus raised numerals beside call buttons. A small, steady cadence, reminding that height should welcome all. On the first platform, a seasonal hanging garden unfurled in May 2025. 16 planter frames woven with jasmine, nasturtium, and alpine strawberries. The installation lowers deck temperature by 1.2 degrees C on hot afternoons and releases a veil of subtle herb scent that threads through lattice shadows. Energy stewardship runs beneath these blossoms. The 2 vertical axis turbines, installed a decade earlier, still spin in near silence between cross braces, delivering roughly 10,000 kWh a year, enough to offset store fridge loads on the floor below. Night lighting, meanwhile, learned restraint. Since 2022, the monument's golden beams fade to amber. At 22, to spare migrating bats and lower wattage, electricity's quiet partner hydrogen stepped into view during 2021 trials that powered the beacon with a zero-emission fuel cell generator. Those tests proved so stable that engineers now plan a compact 100 kW hydrogen stack, cooled by Sino water, to serve as blackout reserve by 2027, freeing the diesel sets that idled in vaults for decades. Inhale softly as if each idea were a rising bubble of clear gas, light, silent, lifting. Traffic at ground level has not slowed. After a pandemic lull, 5.9 million visitors climbed in 2024, stressing entry lanes built for slimmer decades. A dynamic pricing pilot launched in June that year adjusts ticket costs hourly when occupancy nears comfort limits. Early analytics reveal average wait time fell by 12 minutes without spiking total Structural paint remains the tower's most tender ritual. The next cycle, already in procurement, will debut Eiffel Brown 2028, a salon binder formulation promising 45% lower volatile emissions while clinging tighter under projected summer peaks of 41 degrees Celsius. Painters will still tick rivet heads one by one. Some labors resist all automation, yet their brushes will ride on carbon fiber staging. Half the weight once hauled by block and tackle. Even data now has wings. In September 2024, quantum engineers mounted a prototype optical ground station on the summit. It tests hyper-entangled photon keys under the US Yorkshire program, aiming to link national nodes in real-time cryptographic handshake. If trials succeed, 2027 will see permanent telescopic domes added. Faint red glow shielding delicate prisms from city glare. That same node already speaks to space in humbler fashion. Once per night, an ESA nanosatellite flies overhead, beaming packet bursts that bounce through the towers, masked antennas before reaching campus laboratories north of the Ring Road, a mid-orbit relay for student-coded experiments. Logs show latency under 30 milliseconds, swift enough for responsive control of tiny reaction wheels, spinning 200 kilometers above cafes. Earthbound science continues as well. Atmospheric chemists, courting the Paris Climate Agreement targets, fitted an automated air intake line at 260 meters. The sampler filters microparticulates onto quartz pads later analyzed for black carbon isotopes, tracking trans-regional wildfire smoke. Data from July 2025 traced a spike back to Iberian pine blazes, confirming that smoke reached the city in less than 24 hours, shading sunsets orange while most citizens slept unaware. At deck level, mobility experiments weave quietly among tourists. Summer sees a fleet of inductive charging service, carts gliding on solid tires. No diesel stink, no abrupt rattle. The carts recharge by aligning with copper coils set under cafe counters, drawing energy reclaimed from elevator braking. Last year, the system recovered 38 MW, once lost as heat in resistor banks, now flowing back as chilled lemonade. And postcard printers. Culture curators imagine softer spectacles. Designers plotting the 2031 centenary of the annulled demolition clause propose a light labyrinth, a mesh of programmable fiber ribbons threading lower arches. Code will choreograph slow-moving constellations that respond to live winged data gusts, spawning spirals, calms, casting pools of steady glow. Testing began with a 60-meter pilot strand in February 2025, its shimmer revealing faint moire on stone facades across the rip. Let your mind follow that drifting glow, uncoiling without haste. Biodiversity, heroes, share those arches. Since 2024, ornithologists fastened cedar nest boxes behind northeast girders, inviting common swifts whose urban numbers dwindled. Motion cameras recorded 7 fledglings in the first season, their hungry chirps muffled by twinkling metal. At night, chiropterologists trace bat echolocation pulses, noting frequency shifts when amber mode replaces blue spotlight after tenting. Findings help urban planners gauge light spectra that ease nocturnal foragers across countless streets. Accessibility returns in subtler lines. An acoustic beacon system launching autumn 2025 will emit gentle 3 kHz pips, guiding blind visitors from gardens to lift queue. Volume adjusting with ambience to cues. Test walks by advocacy groups trimmed orientation time by 40% compared with static signage alone. A statistic entered proudly into the annual inclusion report. Meanwhile, the digital twin broadens again. Drone photogrammetry from November 2024 captured 3 billion points, giving analysts a canvas where virtual raindrops now slide realistically along truss slopes, predicting pooling zones before storms arrive. In one simulation, heavied water settled near Anchor Shoe 3. Maintenance teams added drainage holes there. 6 weeks later, averting rust before it could root. Heritage lawyers debate classification. But a draft motion before Parliament seeks to elevate the tower from protected site to monument national permanent, creating a dedicated endowment for unpredictable future adaptations. Perhaps seismic dampers, if tremor zone. Hearing set for mid-2026 will decide the scope of that charter, while UNESCO observers monitor conversations about skyline buffer zones, protecting the tower's sight line across new high-rise proposals. Energy watchers push deeper into sustainability. Engineers studying laminar flow along leg interiors, discovered pockets suitable for micro-algae panels, translucent tubes circulating nutrient broth that absorbs cow and sun. Prototype racks produce 21 kilograms biomass a month. Half is burnt in a research boiler whose flue gases warm platform cafe water after filtration. If expanded, the system may shave another % from annual emissions. Small. Yes, yet in towers patience multiplies small. Hydrogen returns in luminous ways. During Paris's 2024 Hydrogen Summit, a zero-emission fuel cell generator illuminated the beacon and revealed that even high-draw arcs can burn clean. Set 5-year plan now earmarks funds for integrating a permanent 100 kW stack beneath the esplanade, ensuring night lighting holds steady even if grid storms sever lines without resorting to diesel's muddied roar. Imagine that calm hum. No smoke. No grit, just quiet electrons moving at their own soft tempo. Telecommunications companies also eye the mast. An upcoming 2030 European regulation will allow shared 6G antennae at icon sites for emergency services priority channels. The tower's height, once sought for flag waving, now offers ultra-low latency latency for ambulances weaving through arrondissements. Implementation studies weigh aesthetic covers, resembling slender louvers, so circuitry disappears into century-old curves. Yet, amid circuits and sensors, certain rhythms refuse change. Each weekday at dawn, a caretaker still walks the leg staircases, listening for tone not captured by digital meters, the dull timbre note of a loosened floorboard, the crisp tick of pinging steel under quick tap. He carries a small oak mallet and sets it to 200 spots, trusting ear and wrist to record what algorithms may miss. His ledger lies in graphite, bound in waxed linen, as spare and faithful as the first safety log from 1887. Public sentiment flows alongside data. Ticket prices rose 20% in 2024 to support the €380 million refurbishment fund. Yet surveys show visitor satisfaction unchanged. Many express relief that fees safeguard an icon. Municipal debates continue over annual licensing charges. But union stewards cite balanced books and near-record footfalls as proof of prudent stewardship. A quieter currency is wonder. On clear summer nights, families still cluster on Champ de Mars lawns, watching strobes wrap the iron lace every hour. Children guess how many bulbs hide in the glitter. Parents know technicians replaced halogen for LED arrays that sip half the power, yet somehow burn brighter. Beneath that tapestry, musicians strum soft jazz, and an occasional breeze carries vanilla from crepe stalls curling beneath arch shadows. Let such scents drift through your own thoughts, light and passing. By late 2025, the tower will have stood 136 years. Half a pulse when measured against geological time, yet encompassing telegraphy, dirigibles, FM jazz, and quantum keys. It remains both artifact and apprentice, still learning new vocations while retaining old grace. If these gentle portraits of living sensors, gardened girders, and future lights have eased your evening, know that sleepy chronicles will always meet you here, where iron breathes so quietly you may mistake it for your own. Far below, the sign glimmers, and above, the beacon draws one slow circle, tracing a path that needs no hurry. May that patient glow lead your mind into restful dark, where even new ideas can sleep untroubled. April 2026 wakens the tower within a hush of dew, and the task ahead is less to climb higher than to listen deeper ire, hearing its own faint heart through strands of glass and code. The 6-year overhaul pledged in 2024. €380 million. Spread to 20. Lead discovered in legacy layers forced painters to abandon abrasive jets. Instead, peel-away gels lift each century-old coat in patient 40-centimeter squares, an innovation born of halted works when toxic dust spiked ahead of the games. While human hands strip pigment, optical fibers woven behind gusset plates record microstretches 2/millionths of a meter wide, feeding a virtual sentinel model updated every midnight cycle. The continuous monitoring scheme began in in 2021, and now tracks spire sway, pillar humidity, and bolt tension in real time. Drones hum before dawn, mapping 3 billion LiDAR points in 40-minute sorties. Their depth cameras see rust scales sooner than eyes and cue. Maintenance tags, long before winter frost can widen a crack. Energy guardianship happens aloft. 2 Visionaire 5 vertical axis turbines, nested above the second level since 2015, still spin 10,000 kilowatt hours each year, enough to run every fridge on the cafe terrace below. Nightfall illumination remains remarkably frugal. Pierre Bidot 20,006 watt sparkles. Bathe the lattice for only 5 minutes each hour, drawing less power than a midtown office block, kept lit overnight. From June 2024 until late September, 5 Olympic rings woven from 100,000 low-intensity LEDs glowed between the first platform arches. Their planned removal now lingers in political debate, mirroring a wider push. Olympiade. Accessibility advances quietly to bronze tactile. Studs guide white cane travelers from lawns to lift gates, while multilingual audio beacons pulse 3 kHz pips that rise and fall with ambient street noise, trimming way, finding time, almost. Crowd science partners with finance. A machine learning algorithm launched after pandemic recovery adjusts ticket prices each hour against live density maps, and early data show average waits dropped 12 minutes. Paint, once merely cosmetic, turns emissary for climate goals. The next cycle debuts. Eiffel Brown 2028. A Selene binder enamel 45% lower in volatile emissions and heat stable to 41 degrees Celsius, guarding steel against fiercer summers ahead. Olympiade. Hydrogen stands ready for darkness. Trials that kept the summit beacon lit via a mobile fuel cell during the 2024 Hydrogen Summit proved so stable that engineers now plan a permanent 100 kilowatt stack, water cooled to. Climate scientists add loftier ears. Doppler LiDAR boxes on the third deck trace wind shear every 30 seconds. Data that Audi controllers already fold into descent advisories after researchers found not. Telecom planners I-6G readiness. A pending 2030 U directive will allow shared public safety antennae at heritage icons. Early schematics propose slender louvers housing phased arrays, invisible to tourists, yet ready to shunt low-latency calls. Light itself prepares as a centenary ballet. Artists finalize the 2031 Light Labyrinth. 1.4 kilometer strands of programmable fiber that will drift through the lower arches, their hue guided by live wind data so that gust. Biodiversity too. Shelters in iron shade. Cedar nest boxes fixed behind northeast girders fledged 7 swift chicks last summer, while amber mode lighting at 22. Zero reduces bat foraging detours by 15%, according to echolocation count. Algorithms talk to rivet logs. When the digital twin flags tension drift above 2 microstrain, a caretaker still confirms with an oak mallet, listening for the timbered note. that no censor yet records the craft of 1887, walking beside code of 2025. By listening more than speaking, the tower continues to keep vigil an iron sentinel, translating century-old lattice into living data streams, while Jasmine drifts across freshly painted rails and soft lead its latest passage through servers, gardens, and living light has eased your breath. Sleepy Chronicles stands ready whenever dusk arrives again. Below, the sign glides, and above, the beacon turns one measured arc patient as ever drawing you toward unhindered rest. Early October 2027 finds the tower top winds shifting, and engineers gather on quiet platforms to weigh not just next month's maintenance, but next generation's resilience. Their conversations drift among cooling breezes and the soft purr of traction motors, sounding almost like monks reciting litany for iron and sky. 3 core horizons guide their plans. First, carbon neutrality by 2035. Every kilowatt drawn for elevators, kitchens, or searchlights must be matched by energy created on site or purchased from clean grids. Thin photovoltaic films now woven into balustrade panels will soon broaden beneath the second deck, capturing midday glare without changing Gauss Ute. Energy modelers forecast that by autumn 2031, sunlight alone will lift 1 in every 4 visitors to the summit. Second, predictive repair shifting from annual checks to continuous insight. The digital twin already flags microstrain, yet by 2029, each anchor shoe will host a palm-sized acoustic sensor. These devices listen for sub-audible creaks, sound signatures below 30 Hz. Then feed machine learning models tuned to distinguish harmless settle from nascent crack. A quiet pattern spotted on a Tuesday may prompt a single bolt torque correction by dawn Wednesday, sparing weeks of scaffold and glare. Third, longevity through reversible interventions. Conservation guidelines now stipulate that any new bolt, bracket, or cable should reverse cleanly without scarring original iron. Engineers test magnesium alloy, clamps that corrode slower yet unscrew with one hand. They explore bio-based primers that breathe, allowing interior moisture to escape without blistering paint. These measures nod toward a future where preservation rarely means permanence, more a soft handshake between eras, standing close but not clenched. Allow your own thoughts to loosen, comfortable in adjustments so slight they barely disturb stillness. Visitor life will shift too. A forthcoming silent summit policy sets aside 1 dawn hour each week. No chatter, no music, just wind and horizon. Tickets already sell out months ahead, promising sunrise reflection. Almost monastic in a city seldom silent. Accessibility strides continue. By 2028, tactile feedback handrails will relay subtle vibration cues, a rising pulse near step edges, a calm wave along level walkways. Early trials show cane users orient 30% faster, the gentle buzz guiding fingertips like a low, steady river current. Climate unforeseeables loom. Heat waves once rare now lengthen each decade. So engineers plan misting nozzles, hidden beneath platform soffits that atomize seine water on sweltering afternoons, cooling decks 2 degrees without soaking iron. Algorithms will time these mists to avoid high humidity hours, guarding paint from untimely condensation. Heritage charters evolve in lockstep. Parliament debates a skyline buffer, capping building heights along a crescent that frames tower views across 5 arrondissements. Should the motion pass, architects will shape new roofs to fold below an invisible curved plane, their bricks and glass yielding to iron's long-held claim on the horizon. Meanwhile, cultural curators script living exhibits. A 2030 performance where dancers wearing lead-threaded capes will trace spiral staircases at twilight, their lights echoing the pulse of elevators as they ascend. Crowds below will watch ribbons of color float skyward, a human ballet answering decades of mechanical grace. Beyond performance, science presses on. Quantum key distribution trials progress toward continuous service. By 2032, every municipal data vault may route nightly backups through photon pairs exchanged across 300 meters of ecology finds niches too. Nest boxes have drawn swifts, but upcoming plans add pollinator pockets. Shallow planters packed with thyme, marjoram, and French lavender along sunny girders. Botanists predict microcolonies of solitary bees will thrive, carrying pollen between sky garden and riverbank shrubs, stitching threads of green across an urban quilt. What? Sense that faint buzz, an almost silent hum of wing and algorithm. Steady, unhurried, sustaining. Crowd management algorithms iterate quietly each month. Ticket modules now consider not only density, but visitor intent, nudging photographers toward golden hour slots, steering school groups into calm mid-morning windows, letting the hush of evening belong to those who seek it. In trials, subjective satisfaction scores climb steadily, proof that measured flow breeds calm minds. The iron itself will mark a milestone in 2039, 150 years standing. Planners imagine a breath of iron ceremony, extinguishing all lights for 60 seconds at midnight, then reigniting them layer by layer from base to beacon, symbolizing the tower's first awakening long ago. No music, only a city holding its breath, and then a gentle exhale of light. Let that slow rekindling glow behind your closed eyes, a patient spark against soft dark. Thus the lattice leans toward tomorrow, carrying microsensors, misting pipes, jasmine vines and secrets whispered by quantum photons, yet still it rests on 8 nickel steel shoes, first poured under winter fog. Past and future remain welded, but the joint is flexible, alive, attuned to every new breeze. If these reflections on coming decades have unclasped the day's tension, remember that Sleepy Chronicles waits each dusk with unhurried stories of making and keeping. Below, the sign murmurs in low tide. Above, the beacon paints one gentle arc over rooftops. May that moving light guide your thoughts into deep and sheltered rest. An April afternoon in 2039, exactly 150 years since the first shovel met garden soil ushers in ceremonies, less about fanfare, more about breath. When the beacon pauses for its single minute of darkness, tens of thousands hush along the Champ de Mars. What begins as collective stillness ends in an upward sigh of light, layer after layer re-illuminating, until the summit star flares last, glittering like dew on a spindle of air. From that luminous reset rides a wider program, 40-year stewardship charts that will carry the tower to its bicentenary. Behind closed workshop doors, engineers draft timetables, using horizon dates previously reserved for astronomy. Their pages outline 4 keystones: energy autonomy, adaptive facades, algorithmic calm, and multi-species welcome, each a pledge that iron shall remain both monument and living community well beyond. Energy autonomy begins with a quiet summit, hung by 2032. The diesel generators, sleeping in vaults, will yield fully to a hydrogen stack cooled by Sine water. Compressors sip renewable electricity at night, stockpiling gas in slender carbon composite tanks tucked into piers. When storms cut grid lines, hydrogen and oxygen meet within polymer membranes, and current flows without flame or fuel. Designers predict the system will deliver 4 nights of beacon glow before reserves run dry ample. They believe, for any outage modern Paris might suffer, even elevators will learn thrift. Research teams trial aramid, core, hoist ropes laced with piezoelectric fibers, so each ascent stores a trace of its own kinetic spill. Regenerative braking already feeds shop refrigerators. Piezo cables will push surplus into battery racks lining leg interiors. Model runs suggest that by 2040, the tower may recycle a quarter of its elevator energy. Silent loops of work, returned as light. Allow your own muscles to ease, imagining momentum circling back to rest, rather than disappearing as heat. Adaptive facades form the next keystone. Engineers once repainted every 7 years. Now they test hybrid films that shift reflectivity by season. In July sun, they bloom pale, scattering infrared outward. Come December, they darken, drinking warmth to temper night frost upon rivet heads. The film's trick lies in microcapsules filled with vanadium dioxide, flipping crystalline phase at 32 degrees Celsius, an unvoiced choreography of atoms shielding iron from thermal lash. Paint remains ritual, however, and will for decades. Crews still chalk rivets one by one, but their staging has grown lighter. Carbon fiber trusses lifted by self-climbing winches that resemble quiet crickets inching upward at dawn. Replacement brushes are hemp-based, lacquered in beeswax to hold linseed without shedding bristle. A century earlier painters tossed spent brushes into the sign, Today each returns to a reclaim bin, destined for mulch in rooftop gardens. Algorithmic calm governs crowds. Ticketing once shifted price by hour. Soon, AI engines will weigh biometric indicators, breathing sync. Focal scatter of pupils captured via consenting optic gates. The model's aim is simple. Sense rising edginess in cue clusters and gently reroute or lengthen music loops before tension sparks. In pilot weeks, micro spikes of restlessness fell by 40%, and no one quite noticed why. Some call it invisible etiquette, others an iron lullaby sung in code. Under that calm, night visitors keep returning, now with a privilege. Motion, silenced floors rolled out across second-deck restaurants. Recycled rubber compressed with cork flex absorbs tremor. Diners barely feel lift rails humming. Candle-warm leads nestle in frosted glass. Dimming by single lumens, each 5 minutes after 10. Easing conversation toward murmured drift. Welcoming other species stands as final keystone. Cedar nest boxes have already coaxed swifts. Next come pollinator pockets, slender planters brimming with lavender, salvia and creeping thyme arrayed on legs facing southeast sun. Entomologists track solitary bees toggling between tube flowers and riverbank orchards, mapping nectar corridors once interrupted by traffic. A single tower may not rewrite ecology, yet it can stretch a bridge of petals across a district of stone. But studies deepen too. Amber lighting after 22 hours cut detours by 15%. Researchers want more. By 2030, a system dubbed Echo Curtain will pulse ultrasonic whispers in sync with rotating beacon shades, gently shepherding bats along chosen arcs rather than startling them scattershot into neon corridors. Algorithms learn on the fly, literally adjusting frequency. When microphone rings, register panic chirps. Yet, iron's own welfare commands equal care. Acoustic sensors, tiny piezo discs glued beneath gusset plates, have begun catching infra-audible murmurs. Micro crack, flutters, rivet shanks breathing against widening holes. A single flag hiss triggers field technicians. Within minutes, they arrive with magnetic clamps and boroscope cameras, verifying what algorithms suspect, tightening bolts, or injecting epoxy before moonlight can widen fractures. Picture those technicians moving quiet as librarians among shelves of air, each gesture measured. Hush. The tower's digital twin, once passive mirror, now predicts storms 2 hours out by comparing cloud cam feeds with boundary layer models. If wind gust risk crosses a threshold, calibrated after decades of LiDAR platform gates, throttle intake lifts slow, beacon shift to a narrower cone that cuts drag. The lattice no longer endures weather. It negotiates terms, trading light for stress margin. Artistic endeavors entwine with stewardship. The planned 2031 light labyrinth will weave optic strands that change hue by whisper of breeze. After its premiere, curators intend a decade-long living canvas, where visiting artists upload algorithms modulating colors. A choreographer might paint pulses in triple meter sapphire. A poet could sink crimson blooms to spoken verse diffused across hidden speakers. Each code clip runs only at assigned dusk, then archives, leaving the tower a gallery of nights, never one night the same. Educational outreach expands downward. A subterranean gallery excavated beneath the esplanade using hydro mill cutters will debut in 2033. Visitors will walk among cutaway leg segments, touch rivet iron chilled to cellar coolness, and watch holograms overlaying crack propagation in real time, bridging feel and force. Access will be free on equinox mornings, a nod to open science that first saved the tower from 1909 demolition. Above, quantum experiments mature. Photons still leap between summit domes and Sorbonne rooftops, but by 2035, they will extend to a Leo satellite cluster, building Europe's node in a global quantum web. In that silent corridor of light, encryption keys flicker brighter than beacon lamps, yet remain unseen by strolling couples who share crepes beside billowy lawns. Community anchors broaden. Once yearly, tower management will trade ticket revenue for donated hectares of rewilded meadow. Along upstream Zina bends, a yield of iron, paying dividends in grassland skylarks and basking lizards. The exchange highlights relational stewardship. Maintain the monument, nurture the river's source, let both feed city breath. Feel that reciprocal flow, river nourishing tower, reflections. Tower repaying with quiet meadow guardianship. A final thread unspools toward 2050. Reversible weighting against sea level rise storms. Though Paris stands far inland, climate models propose heavier rainfall and stronger sinus surges. Engineers design quick deploy barrier fins, composite leaves, hinged near anchor shoes that deflect 50-year floodwater pressure, preventing scour of gravel strata laid in 1887. The fins fold back invisibly when calm returns, like shutters on a contemplative eye. Should even grander contingencies arise, earthquake, tremors, drifting north, or aerial drone congestion. Near the mast embedded shock, absorbers and defense beacons stand ready. But caretakers trust that adaptation, woven early, seldom strains late. Risk shrinks when addressed at whisper stage, not shout. Thus iron moves into decades where it will monitor itself more than any guard could, yet still rely on human ear and fingertip. The oak mallet test persists. A daily note rung under dawn lamplight to honor craft older than code. Night closes with gentle pulses. Beacon arcs, elevator brakes, feeding power back into frozen yogurt freezers. Microbats tracing insect spirals beneath lavender-scented planters. Sensors ticking micro-strain die. All these heated rhythms merge into one subtle lull. If these future measures energy loops, adaptive skins, listening iron, and shared nightlights have lightened the weight of daylight on your shoulders. Remember that sleepy chronicles will always walk here in unhurried stride. The sign slips black as silk beneath stone arches. Above, the beacon's patient circle writes a wordless promise across cloud. May that promise escort your breathing into deep, unrippled rest.